While none of my experiences were all that intense, there are several things that I have seen and heard that are more than real. I was born in a tiny town not far outside of the New York border. The town grew up as a railroad mining town. Our house was built at the edge of town, the owner liking his privacy. While everyone in town took him to be a bachelor that spent most of his time at the rail yards, it became apparent when the old man died that he did have a son. The son moved in and raised a family there, also working in the rail yard. The family produced 2 sons. Tintypes of the family were found in my bedroom closet wall when we remodeled. After this lineage, a daughter and son were born to one son, and the other died. It was this son's daughter that greeted me not long after we moved into the house. It didn't help that she had died almost 30 years before I was born. Through the back door, across the old linoleum floor to the staircase in the room at the top, I lay snug in my little bed. I'd been playing earlier that day and had left an old music box, found in the room when we moved in, open on my dresser. My parents were downstairs enjoying their television when they heard me scream. I had rolled over, disturbed by something in my sleep that I couldn't quite explain, and sat up. My music box, completely unwound when I'd gone to bed, was playing cheerily. But it wasn't that had woken me up. It was the figure of a girl standing next to my bed, gazing out my bedroom window into the backyard. My first thoughts were that she was lovely, long blonde hair and a pale blue dress, hands clasped behind her with a slightly sad air about her. It changed quickly, though, when she turned to look at me and instead of disappearing, advanced on me, hands outstretched, her face changing from benevolent to cruel in a heartbeat. My mother sprinted up the stairs with more energy than I've seen in her since, driving her away. But it would not be the last time I would see her, though after that, each visit was absolutely benevolent. A few years later, we, the family and I, began remodeling the house, tearing out walls and finding pieces of the house we had not counted on. Anyone who's ever remodeled a house knows the strange things that can be found in the walls. Between the gross of finding a mouse corpse in one of my walls to finding the remains of a burnt-out old chimney on another, we also found a death certificate. One for Elizabeth Grimney, born July 17th, 1940, died March 22nd, 1952. The cause of death was so blurred with time and so undeterminable, but we finally had our ghost, Elizabeth. We've realized, too, that my music box was hers, too, tied to it somehow. Since the remodeling, though, I've not seen her, and I have the sinking feeling that I won't again. Strange. I feel as though I've lost a friend. My haunted place was in Phoenix, Arizona. My mother, sister, and I and our family dog Snoopy, and a parakeet Albert, lived in a condominium. We lived there from 1971 to 1974. I mention the pets as some of the most horrifying things happened to these animals. Here were some of the events which occurred. My dog Snoopy would always be locked in the closet in the master bedroom. I would leave for somewhere, my mother and sister would be gone. I would know instinctively, as the house was quiet, too quiet. I would go upstairs and open the closet door, and out he would fly like a bat out of hell. I awoke one morning to find my parakeet, Albert, hanging by one foot on his perch. His head was in a grotesque position, like he had been strangled. I had to put him down. Weeks later, I heard voices outside the window. The voice of a doll, Chatty Cathy. I believe a doll like that was made by Mattel. The voices sounded like the doll, Chatty Cathy. "Why, Mary, why did you leave me?" I remember that night as I almost put my head through the window, straining to hear what the doll-like voice was saying to me. I visited a psychiatrist the next day. She said voices heard like that were a sign of schizophrenia. I didn't believe it. After moving out here to California, I have never heard voices. I heard them that night. Another night, I remember hearing the lulling sound of wind chimes. I yelled out to my mother and told her how relaxing the sound of the chimes was. She said, "Mary, we don't have wind chimes." Another night, the wrought iron stairwell lunged out and caught my mother's arm, left a permanent X on it, scratched her arm. The stairwell. Other incidents happened. Black bubbling tar-like substances in the toilet, a smell like a dead animal in the walls. My sister, at the time, was in high school. I have heard that poltergeists sometimes occur with teenage girls. Anyway, I believe the site was haunted. The building contractor went bankrupt, and those of us in condos were in limbo for a while. One by one, the few families left. I once went back there to investigate the new residents. I went across the street, and a 1989 black Firebird came out of nowhere and almost ran me down. I decided the site itself was haunted, and the ghostly inhabitants didn't want me around, asking questions of the current residents. I was just reading A Sea of Voices in the Night by Ant 1111. You know, that story brings back a memory of something that happened when I was around 16 years old. We were house-sitting for a friend of my dad's. They had been family friends all my life and seemed like family. His friend's mom had passed away not long prior to this, and I don't know where he was, but anywho, I spent the night there several times before. I just finished watching The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and had laid down. I'd only shut my eyes for a minute or two. The window was open beside the bed I was in, and the back door was around the corner from the head of the bed. I heard voices, like maybe 4 or 5 people were coming from the barn to the house. Then I heard footsteps, and the back door open. Now, I know no one else but us should have been around there. And these voices sounded like it was the most natural thing in the world to be coming in the house at that time of night. I was scared shitless. All I could think was, "You moron! Why did you leave the back door open?" I found I could not move or open my eyes. I knew I was scared, but even at the time I thought surely I wasn't scared to the point of paralysis. The word aliens came to mind, but aliens who spoke perfect English, it didn't make sense. I heard the group walk up to the side of my bed and stand over me talking in hushed tones, like they didn't want to wake up anyone else. I could tell they were right over me, looking down at me. I went through the "I have to be dreaming" reasoning, because I thought for sure I was on the verge of panic if something sensible didn't come to mind. But I knew I couldn't have fallen asleep in the approximately 60 seconds or less I had laid down, when I started hearing them coming from the direction of the barn. I understood everything that they were saying, and it had something to do with things that would happen to me in the future. I found this even more disturbing. Were they angels, demons, ghosts, aliens? How did they know me so intently, and what was the purpose of this? The next thing I knew, I woke up, and it was about 1 a.m. or so, and I was laying in the living room. No pillow or blanket. Just sprawled out on the living room floor with the lights and TV off, so I knew I didn't fall asleep watching TV. I asked the next morning if someone got up and turned everything off. No one had. I've never sleepwalked, and I wasn't overly tired or distraught about anything, nor could I recall what they had talked about when I awoke. I just knew it had concerned me and my future. I found it very disturbing for a while, and I can't believe I forgot about it until reading that story. I've read a lot of the stories here, and noticed that a lot of folks say this. I'm not sure if I saw a ghost, but here's my story. As a child of about 5 or 6 maybe, I was the only boy and had my own room. My 2 sisters had the room straight across the hallway from me. Now, this was about 1976 or 1977. We had gas heat through the entire house, so at night my dad would turn off all the heat. As a child in Georgia, we used to have cold winters, so the house would be very cold at night. I felt a cool breeze blow over my face and I woke up. I saw a teenage girl standing in my doorway, blonde hair and wearing a long white gown. I thought it was my older sister, so I called out to her and said, "Ain't you cold?" Well, you can guess she didn't answer me. I called out again, and she just stood there watching me. Well, I quickly covered my head, and when I peeked out again, she was gone. And of course, when I ran across the hall, she was in bed, sound asleep. There were several things that happened in that old house. See someone run across the porch, and no one was ever there. Our bathroom had a hook to lock the door. One day, my middle sister and I were home alone, and the door was shut and locked. Okay, someone shut it, and the hook fell and locked. Not a chance. 10 minutes later, the door was unlocked and opened right up. I really don't know if I believe in ghosts or not, but I know what happened in that house. Feel free to write me, anytime. Around 1986, my family and I moved into a home in a city called Veneta. It used to house 2 residences. The upstairs had its own kitchen, bath, and bedrooms. The downstairs could house a bigger family. The side door that led out into the driveway was where I first saw a little old lady. We had such crazy paranormal episodes there that it never made any sense. My brother had made a remark about a cat that she used to own there. 2 hours later, a similar cat appeared with the exact same markings as a cat she had owned 13 years earlier, which of course fascinated me. Banging could also be heard from under the house that raised furniture off the floor. I never even entered the garage due to the bad vibes I would get there. After a few months of noises and mischief, we decided to move. About 2 weeks later, we drove back past the old house, and as I looked up into what used to be my room, there she was. It was the little old lady looking and staring right down at me. There was never an indication of an old lady who lived there. Not one that was alive at the time. Later, the side of the house burnt in both places where I had seen her. If we had stayed, me and my sister would have been trapped in the upstairs and more than likely would have perished. My husband and I lived in White Eagle, Oklahoma, about 1.5 years ago with our 4 children. One morning, about 4:30, I was feeding my 4-month-old son in my front room when I saw a shadow cross the window. It stood about 7 or 8 feet tall and had the shape of a man. I couldn't see what it was exactly because my blinds were closed, but it walked in front of the window and stopped as if to look in the front room, and then continued to walk around the east side of the house where my bedroom was. Our bedroom was right off of the front room. It stopped in the middle of my bedroom window and turned its whole body to face my bedroom and then turned around and walked off. The next morning, I walked around my house and saw no footprints. I've been told by my community members that Bigfoot is known to walk around by White Eagle, and that was what I saw. A couple weeks after that happened, my husband and I had just gotten into bed, and we heard a banging on our side of the wall from the outside. My husband thought it was the children playing a joke on us, and he went outside to chase them off, but found nothing. He came back in and got in bed again when we heard something hit our front door. I told him to just leave whatever was outside alone. I lived in Ponca City my whole life, and was raised knowing about Bigfoot. I do believe he walks around White Eagle, and that was what I saw that night. At night you can be outside and all of a sudden smell something really stink. I was always told when you smelled that it was Bigfoot. White Eagle as a community is haunted. I've heard so many stories about what people have seen or heard. Thanks for taking the time to listen to one of my stories.
This all started when I was 16. I was on holiday while visiting my aunt at her house in a place called Brynmoore. The house that my aunt and cousin live in dates back centuries, to a time before the 17th century. The house has 3 bedrooms with an extension, an attic made into 2 bedrooms with a stairway heading onto the 2nd floor, opposite the bathroom. On the second floor, there are 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom downstairs. There is a spare room, which is called the private room, and an extra toilet, as well as a kitchen heading into the laundry room. My cousin once mentioned seeing a ghost of a decrepit man with creepy black eyes, but no one believed her. While my aunt went out shopping to visit a friend, me and my cousin were alone listening to music and messing around the kitchen, which had an old fireplace. Centered in the kitchen next to the window that viewed the back garden, the house was on full heating. That was until the room temperature went down and the room went cold and silent. We both paused and stopped the music as a cold breeze shivered down our spines. We slowly started heading toward the door, which was linked into the hall. The hallway was twice as cold as it was in the kitchen. We then heard footsteps, froze, and turned our heads to the stairway when we saw an old shadow of a priest. The shadow was just a dark, shadowy figure with a see-through image staring straight at us. We both paused and could not speak. We both panicked and legged it to the front door that led outside the house. While we were running, one of the mirrors that was on the wall fell out of nowhere and came sliding across the floor in the hall. It slid and tripped me, which left me with a big bruise on my ankle. I ended up running right out of the house until I reached my cousin's home a couple blocks down the road, banged on the door, and he let me in. This was a different cousin from my aunt. That moment will always be stuck in my head for the rest of my life. My aunt has now moved out and is now living in a small house. Whoever now owns the old house, good luck. I am 20, and I haven't seen my cousin and my auntie for 2 years. I would like to share something with you that happened to me just this week, and it involves my 9-year-old daughter. I was at work and my personal line rang, and it was my daughter Sydney. She was sleepy and I could tell that she had just woken up. She said, "Mom, Nanny told me to call you and tell you that you don't have any oil in your car. She wouldn't let me go back to sleep until I call you to tell you that." I don't know anybody named Nanny, and I never heard her speak of anyone she called Nanny either. So I was confused. I figured that she must be dreaming or something. Sure, yeah, right, a 9-year-old dreaming about motor oil? Okay. So, on my lunch break, I was intrigued, and I checked the oil in my car. Nothing. It was empty. I did need oil in my car. I could hardly believe it. I put oil in my car and came back into my office and called my daughter back to ask her a little more about Nanny. I asked her if Nanny came to the door or what. She said, "No, Mom, she just popped up beside my bed, and she kept telling me to call you, that you don't have oil in your car, and if I don't call you, she wouldn't let me go back to sleep." I asked her if she was dreaming, and she said no. She had awakened her to call me. I asked her how she knew Nanny. She told me she had met her when she was 4, when Grandma was sick in the nursing home. My mother was sick and in a nursing home for about 6 months before she died. She said the lady would tell her stuff sometimes. I asked her what she looked like, and she told me she was a skinny lady with short gray hair, and she was wearing a yellow outfit. It sounded like my grandmother, my mother's mom. Last night I was at my grandfather's house visiting with my aunt and uncle and grandmother. I told my grandpa about what happened that day, and he said that he truly believes that it was his wife, my grandmother, visiting and watching over us.
Here's kind of a creepy story. I go to school at LALU, and my school, mind you, it is a private school. We are on a lake, and other things such like that. Well, many students here have seen the LALU ghost, and apparently, we have more than one haunting. One of my friend's sisters was being followed around by it. In one part of the school, there are wooden steps, which makes lots of noise when you walk down them. She started to walk down them, and she heard loud footsteps behind her. She stopped. It stopped. She looked around. No one was there. So, she kept going, and the footsteps kept going. That, from what I heard, was the last time I know that the ghost had been sighted, until 2 weeks ago. It was a late Thursday afternoon when my friends Kai, Clover, and Jess walked down to the Pine Room, which is basically our storage room in Lost and Found, to get a binder or something. When they went down there, Clover had started to feel a presence. Kai saw a flicker of light, and Jess saw the entire figure of what she could only explain as a ball of white light. All three of them just got what they needed and left, talking about this ghost. This is how I found out. I overheard them talking, and so did my friend, Jake. Jake is the most skeptical person I've ever met in my entire life. He doesn't even believe in luck. I had told Jake about this, and he basically laughed, and we went to go see Kai, who seems to be the resident expert on the occult here at LALU, and find out what happened. Dave, who is also a skeptic, was laughing at her for saying this and wanted to see it himself. Kai told all three of us not to go down there. It'll just make him mad, and I trusted her, mainly because I believe in ghosts and the supernatural and everything like that, and I stayed. Where Jake and Dave went down to the Pine Room to try to see it, they came back empty-handed and laughing. We talked a little bit more about the ghost and what it could potentially do to you if it was mad enough. Then, Jake and Adder decided to try again. By this time, about 10 other people found out and wanted to see it too. Everyone went down, and everyone heard a loud bang, but nothing else. Then everyone went back up, but for some reason, Jake was called back downstairs. He was just inside of the door when he saw this ball of light pass in front of him to the adjacent corner. Scared, he ran as fast as he could, back up to where me and Kai were waiting. He told us of this story, and David overheard as well. So, being the idiot that he is, Dave went back down there and, yet again, didn't see anyone or anything. Dave then went to go see Clover, who was waiting in the stairwell down the hall to where we were at. We started to follow, slower than him, and about halfway, we all had the same feeling as Dave Giuliano did in his story. The hairs on her arms sticking up, and an uncomfortable constant shiver. At that time, in unison, we all asked, "Did you feel that?" Then, the creepiest thing happened to me. A feeling of soft, very, very soft hands, almost like wind, only solid, ran across my arm. And later, I found out that every time that Jake had walked by that spot and that feeling happened, his legs started cramping up. We went to the stairwell and we talked with the two. Kai was shouting at Dave because it was challenging the ghost to its face, and then she moved over a little, and both me and Jake saw it. We didn't see anything, really, but we knew it was there in its exact movements. Move over from the exact spot she was standing, right over to where Dave was squatting, and, after David challenged the ghost again, we left. After all this, I found out from Kai that it was a different ghost, and that when Dave challenged it, she had saw it laughing. Within 2 days of this sighting, my friends Ben and Jamie were playing with the camera to use up the film. which only had 3 pictures left, and it was disposable. Ben's had looked through the viewfinder and saw a ball light behind Jamie and took the picture. They developed the film, and it was caught on film. Hi, I'm from Ireland, and I haven't seen many stories from here. Well, my experience started in 1997. I was 15 when we moved to the house. We moved to a little village in Wexford. Our new house is over 150 years old, but has been done up and looks modern. Anyway, about 2 weeks after moving into our new house, I was trying to go to sleep one night when I heard someone calling the name Martin. I shared a room with my younger sister at the time, and she was fast asleep. I was wide awake, and whoever was calling a name called it about 5 or 6 times. The next day, when I woke up, I went down to my parents and asked who lived in the house before us. They told me don't be stupid, and that I know. Then, I asked who lived in the house before the people we bought the house off of, and I was told a man's name, called Jimmy Martin, and his wife. At first I thought this was a coincidence, and I never said what happened the night before. I soon started to feel someone was watching me all the time, especially in the sitting room. It is hard to explain, but even though I could not see anything, I could tell you there was an old lady standing in front of the sitting room door, and this is where she always stands. I was afraid to go to sleep some nights, as one night, when I was laying in my bed, something kept hitting me on the back of my head, as if to try and wake me up. Well, I was wide awake, but I was too scared to look, as I was afraid of what I could see. Another night, I was just dozing off, when someone decided to sit on the edge of my bed. This frightened the life out of me. I had kept all these experiences to myself, as I thought if I told anyone, they would think I was mad. I had an ensuite in my room, and one night, the toilet handle started going up and down by itself. Everything was getting to me, so after 3 years of keeping it all to myself, I started telling some of my friends what was happening to me. They thought it was scary and asked me what my parents thought. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't tell them, but I just said they would think I'm mad. Anyway, more stuff started happening, but nothing serious. I went out for a few drinks with my mom and one of their friends, and when the night was over, we all came back to my house and had a cup of tea and a chat. They got into the subjects of spirits and started talking about past experiences they had. I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to tell them about mine. I started with my sentence with, "You're going to think I'm mad, but," and then I started to cry. I told them everything that was happening to me, and to my surprise, they had their own experiences. My dad was sitting in the sitting room one night, reading the newspaper, when a woman started whispering his name and started running her fingers down through his hair. My mom has heard them walk around upstairs, and she could hear them call her name sometimes. And when she was in bed one night, it was like someone was blowing cold air into her ear. My brother woke me up one night because there was an argument going on in his room, and to his surprise, there was 5 spirits in his room, bickering at each other. His room is across from mine. My mom and dad were annoyed with me because I never told them what was happening to me. We have 2 bedrooms upstairs and 2 downstairs. Me and my sister used to share a room upstairs, but she has now moved out, and my brother, who has also slept upstairs, has moved out now, so I'm up there by myself, and some nights, I can feel there's someone there, and it would take me half the night to go to sleep, as I would be terrified, lying in my bed. I'm 21, and the eldest of 4 children. Now that my brother and one of my sisters have moved out, my little sister, 13, looks up to me and likes to do stuff together. She's often asked me about my experiences, which are still happening today, but I won't tell her too much, as it would frighten her. To end my story, I will tell you about a reading we held in our house. A man came to our house who could see spirits, and he gave about 10 of us our readings. I was first to get mine done, and as I sat down, the kitchen door opened. As I got up to shut it, the man told me to wait a minute. He then told me that he is now, and that I should shut the door. This sent a shiver down my spine. He told my mother how I can sense spirits, and how a bad spirit entered the room with me. He said that he got rid of him, but there's a spirit that follows me around, but it's a good spirit, and this is the one that I can sense around me all the time. He said that there are a few spirits in my house, but they're good, well except the bad one he got rid of. Well, that's my story, and it's going on today. The good news is, I've just learned to live with it, in the sleepless nights at times. Hopefully I'll be the next to move, because the terror drives me mad sometimes. Thank you. First off, I'm 19 and have believed in ghosts my entire life. Now, I don't have a sixth sense, but I find it fun to discuss ghosts and all sorts of unexplained occurrences. I'm a pretty athletic guy and played football through high school, and am pretty strong too. I can bench 280. I'm not saying this to sound like I'm bragging, just to say I'm not afraid of that much. But what happened to me 2 summers ago left me pretty shaken. I was about 17 at the time, and had found out about a haunted church through my mother. She had gone when she was younger. Nothing happened, except she had a really weird feeling the whole time she was there. Well, finding ghosts fascinating, I wanted to go, but didn't want to go by myself, so I told my brother about it. We decided to go on a Saturday night. Maybe we'd have a story to tell at the parties. My brother at the time was 15, and he wanted to bring some friends along, so I agreed. Altogether there were the 5 of us, me, my brother, my brother's friend, and 2 girls they wanted to impress. The layout of the church goes like this. The church is in the middle of a field, surrounded by woods. All around the church in sort of a U pattern are graves. The graves start a little ahead of the church and meet in back, forming the U. There is no space between the graves and church for a few people to walk. In front of the church is a stone wall about 3 feet high and 2 sensor trigger lights on each side of the stone wall. We parked in a little dirt parking lot right in front of the church and got out. Me, being the oldest and assumed the bravest, went over the wall first. As soon as my feet hit the ground on the other side of the fence, I got a really bad feeling and my hair stood on end. The first thing we did was go up to the front steps and hang out for the first couple of minutes. The thing that struck me was that there was no noise at all inside the wall, no crickets or anything, which is strange because it's surrounded by woods. Once we got bored of sitting around, we decided to go around back. That's when the really weird stuff started to happen. We were walking in a straight line because none of the younger kids wanted to be last. It was me, my brother's friend, the 2 girls, and my brother. That was the order from left to right. We were walking so that I was closest to the grave, and my brother was closest to the church. About halfway down the length of the church, we all heard a whooshing sound. My brother's friend and I to the left, and my brother and the 2 girls to the right, like we were being surrounded. Everyone asked each other if they heard the sound, and we all answered yes. After that noise, Mike, my brother's friend, and the 2 girls wanted to leave, but my brother and I convinced them to stay. Not that I wasn't scared, I just wanted to see more. I forgot to mention that me and my brother both had flashlights, which gets important. As we made our way to the back of the church, we all heard a loud hum, kind of like electric wires, but no one were around. This sound kept getting louder. Also, this went on through the whole entire time we were there, and probably would have scared us enough, if not for what happened next. At about the same time, I heard a noise. I saw a black ink blot, like shape move from a grave to behind a bush. I tried to follow it with a flashlight, but it was too fast. However, Mike saw it move from that same bush to behind another tree. From that point, we would hear sounds and directions all around us, and when my flashlight or my brother's was aimed at the spot we heard the sound, we would just get a glimpse of a shape going back the way the light came to, too fast for us to follow it. Now, there had to be more than one of whatever they were, because as me and Mike were going through this on one side, My brother and the two girls were doing the same, on the other side. All of a sudden, I heard my brother and the two girls scream. My brother is a pretty tough kid himself, and I never heard him scream like that in my entire life. Never mind the girls. When I turned to see what was wrong, the three were sprinting out of there at a very fast pace. When I heard them scream, I almost panicked, but got my nerves under control. Mike, however, took off like a world-class sprinter, leaving me by myself. Not wanting to be the only one there, I backpedaled as fast as I could, so I could see whatever it was, if it was coming after us. At this point, the humming was almost deafening, and that's when I got the impression that whatever was making the sound was coming closer at every very fast pace. At that same moment, my flashlight went dead, and then I did panic. I turned and ran faster than ever before in my life. When I reached the stone wall, I saw everyone else in the car waiting for me. I just jumped the stone wall. As soon as my feet landed, the flashlight went back on. The humming stopped, and I heard, guess what? Crickets chirping. Also, all the feelings of fear I had disappeared, and everything was calm. I got in the car and asked what my brother and the girls had seen. They said it was the body of a little girl floating inside the second-story window. At that time, the sensor lights went on, meaning something was coming towards the gate. Remembering the humming sound, I took off as fast as possible. There have been other stories about how people have seen the little girl or heard her playing the flute, but none to the extent of ours. After this happened, I did a little research, and this is what I found. In the 70s, a man raped and murdered 5 young women and buried them in the back of the graveyard behind the church. I don't know where the little girl comes into the picture, but that is what everyone sees. Later, when I asked my brother why a little girl scared them so much, he said the face looked mad, like it wanted us out, and he just got a bad feeling when he saw it. And this is the only ghostly experience, and hopefully the only bad one I'll ever have, and this story is 100% true. Hi, not sure if you are interested, but here's a couple of stories from the place I live in Tasmania, Australia. My boyfriend and I live in Daisy Cottage, an 1832 brick and stone house in Marquis Street, South Hobart, Tasmania, Australia. Daisy Cottage was originally built as a 9-room hotel by an Irish stonemason. He built an almost identical house right next door for himself, which has been empty the entire time we have lived in Daisy Cottage. Legend has it that he witnessed the stabbing murder of the local policeman and testified against the killer in court. The killer was sentenced to lashings, followed by hanging death, and apparently it is he who haunts the house. Strange things have happened, but only one of us is in the house. The first thing happened to Chris, my boyfriend. He arrived home from work one day and checked the mailbox for an important letter that he was expecting. He took it out of the mailbox, opened the front door, and headed upstairs to the bedroom to get changed. On the way, he started to open the letter. Once upstairs, he realized it was raining, so he put the partially open letter on the bed and went downstairs and out into the back courtyard to take the washing off the clothesline. Once he got back inside, he went back to open and read the letter, and it was not there. After about 30 minutes of searching, he called me out of frustration. I arrived home and helped him look for the letter, turning the house upside down. Eventually I said, "Are you sure you took it out of the letterbox? Maybe you should check." Sure enough, there it was, sitting in the letterbox, partially opened. Second strange thing happened 2 days ago. I was alone in the house, doing some painting. It was getting dark, so I turned on the hall, bathroom, dining room, and kitchen lights, and had not ventured upstairs at all. I finished, cleaned up, and started turning off all the lights, getting ready to leave, as we currently aren't staying there during the renovations. I got to the front door and realized that there were lights still on in the house. Every single light upstairs had been turned on. As I left, I noticed that there was a light on in the upstairs of the empty house next door. The one thing that really got me though, as I was looking towards that house, I noticed some kind of print, like a handprint there. When I say handprint, I mean a floating hand. It was very faded, and then it just disappeared. Well, I guess he needed some light in the house. Thanks for reading.